Welcome to week 4 of the 6 Dimensions of Life in the New World, brought to you by CISO and MDG and sponsored by Freeman. Anybody who joined late, I mentioned David sends his regrets. He's on a little beach holiday with his family today, so it's just us. As a reminder, for those of you who could make it last week or those of you who didn't, Bruce Vaughan spoke about designing experiences for all of the senses, and he showed us some really cool immersive VR technology. All right, sorry, I think I just got muted. I know some of the breakout groups expanded on that topic by talking about innovative uses of technology at events, specifically in relation to designing better experiences. In our group, we actually talked about online events last week, and I think one of the things that I'm really liking about these events is just that we're finding kind of a nice balance in terms of addressing things that are immediate in the wake of the current crisis, as well as kind of addressing the things that we need to be, maybe just thinking about and planning for and eventually acting on to ensure that when we do return to live, the physical events that we're creating are going to reflect the reality of the new world. So this week's topic is actually live is tribal. We know that people naturally want to form networks or tribes of individuals with relevant commonalities. And I think now more than ever, people really are craving that sense of community and meaningful human connection. So our next speaker actually designed a series of events around that idea, around this sense of community. And Bruce, I'm going to let you take the introduction from here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Let me share my screen and we'll get going here. There we go. So we're very, very excited to have Sherry Huss join us today. And Sherry is a kind of force of nature. She was a co-founder of Faire and innovator in residence at Freeman. And I've had the good fortune to do some work with Sherry, and her commitment to community, to really what it means to bring a group of people together around purpose is really unmatched. And so we've asked Sherry to really share some of her experience and insights around that subject. So Sherry, take it away.
Excellent, thank you. Well, it's an honor to be here today, and there's probably nothing more than I like talking about than community, and hopefully I can help all of you start thinking about how community can be a major part of your program going forward. One of the key things to think about community, and I usually start out, community and audience are different. Audience is who you're promoting to, but community, the real special part of community is really that you're connecting people that share pretty much an identity, a purpose, and a narrative, and that's where we'll start. So my background, which is trying to kind of keep it brief here, but my first experience and exposure to events was back in 1996 when I was part of Ziff Davis events. And Java One was the first event ever. And before that, I was working for Ziff Davis, spending a lot of time on online community, which wasn't that interesting at that time. Those were the days of CompuServe, AOL, Prodigy, and it was really a text-based system. So I was so eager to get my hands on doing a live event. And I can remember actually getting called into the head of operations office because all of his team they were complaining about me because who is this woman? Like, she's coming in here, she wants to do different things, we don't think it's right. And that was kind of really the start of my journey and career in the event world. After launching Java One, which we delivered a successful event, we had over 3,000 paid attendees. It was kind of the beginning of launching a whole studio that we became an event agency, and every developer group from Sun, Oracle, Microsoft, Cisco really wanted us to work on that. I then went, and I really like building and creating and designing. So Web 2.0, which was an idea that Dale Doherty had from O'Reilly Media. He could not get Tim O'Reilly to buy off on the idea, which is a bit ironic now since Tim the last part of Tim's career has been on Web 2.0. But anyway, worked on that. And then 2005, I found myself in an interesting situation where I got to design two major events. One was for Michaela O'Connor Abrams at Dwell on Design, and the other one was Maker Faire. The rest is kind of history, and maybe we can kind of chat a little bit about that. Maker Faire was really, the idea of Maker Faire was really to be an event that celebrated makers. And O'Reilly Media had just launched a magazine called Make. Make had a subtitle of Technology on Your Time. It was mostly males, engineers, people that actually got into engineering because they wanted to make things. And then their first job, they found out they were managing people, projects, and budgets. So that was an interesting group of people to start thinking about, and also the world that they had. And one of the big things that I needed to think about a lot at that time was an open source philosophy, which O'Reilly had. And I came from Ziff Davis and, you know, the Interface Group and Comdex and all these folks that were like, we own this brand, it's ours, we own the IP. And all of a sudden I had to think like, well, what if the community owns it? And what if it's a participatory culture? And what if it's open source and sharing? And that made me think. And I would like to just plant that seed with everyone right now. And we can come back and talk about it in breakout groups. But what does an open source culture mean to even how you're moving your brand forward, especially building tribes and communities in this environment? So with any great movement, you know, you usually have a mantra. And at Make it was, if you can't open it, you don't own it. So what that meant, and actually even when building tribes, you really need to have language or a common vision or principles that pull you together. And for the Make community, they were saying, you know, they had a Bill of Rights that said, you know, batteries need to be standard, power cords shouldn't be proprietary. If you screws, you know, these are all hosts of things that you definitely needed to move your brand forward. And so that's kind of another thing is when you're starting a movement, these are things that, again, you can start building and creating. So the next slide, this was the beginning of Maker Faire. And I'll tell you, it was quite a wild ride, and there were several years. This was over a 12-year period. Several years in the beginning that was like, if I had to say what Maker Faire was one more time, and going out and finding makers, trying to support sponsors. It was so challenging, but I have to say when I look at the slide, and I just did a screen capture of an image library on Google, we actually have Maker Faire around the world, and I have to say it's such a great thing, and it just makes me so happy, and I want to tell you about how we got there. So with Maker Faire, and the next slide will show you a little bit of the trajectory and kind of the hockey stick growth. There were two interesting time periods. One was the 2008, when things were looking pretty grim, kind of similar to now, maybe not at the same level of depth, but certainly we were concerned about what we were going to do. We could get a community to come to the event, but I couldn't get sponsorship dollars, and that recession really tanked everything. So in 2009, we regrouped, and there were a couple things that we did that year. I got a $25,000 grant from the Kauffman Foundation, and through that, I was able to source kind of writing a playbook. So could I get Maker Faire out into communities that I couldn't? I mean, we were a small team, and don't forget, we weren't an event company. It was really hard going from an event company to a publishing company where you kind of had to bring everyone along and create all of this, all the event back end. But the playbook actually helped us create a licensing program, which actually a lot of the licensed fairs were kind of in the 2 shades of blue, and you can see that was really important. And that was from just a $25,000 investment. So this isn't about money, this is kind of about thinking smart. And then we formed 2 strategic relationships. One with the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan. That was a joint venture. And another one with the New York Hall of Science, as I was looking for a venue partner, but a venue partner that shared the same mission that we did. And they were based in Queens on the site of the Old World's Fairground. And that really helped starting us grow. The other kind of stroke of luck, which was 2014 when we had a White House Maker Faire. And I sure think we probably all wish we had those days back again, because that was when we had an Office of Science and Technology Programs. And that actually opened us up for international awareness. So the European Commission, well, if the White House had it, then they wanted to do something, and the same thing in China. So that gives you a little bit of background on kind of me. And now I wanted to talk a little bit about a couple principles that I wanted to share with you that I think that maybe can help inform or guide you as you're thinking about how you move forward. So this statement, to be in the community, you have to be part of the community. And I'm going to say this is like rule number one of tribe building. And it's so simple, yet it's so complex at the same time. And what I mean by this is that you can't, and again, this goes back to the audience versus community. To really be part of the community, you have to understand their language. You have to know where to go. You have to know what's important to them. And my first question to all of you is, do you have a community manager? And if so, is this community manager doing more than posting on social media? That's a start. And even a big concept or idea here is thinking about, now might be the time to look for like a chief community officer. And I'm not a big one on titles and whatnot, but the point is to really get someone that's thinking about community 24/7. Salesforce has, and obviously everyone is aware of the Dreamforce event. They've done a really great job about being part of the community with their whole Trailblazer program. If you aren't aware of that, check it out, because they use a lot of tactics. They use gamification, they use learning, there's sharing, and there's just a whole sense that you kind of want to be part of it. Another outside of the event world, there's a group in San Francisco that I was tracking that started the same time that Maker Faire did, which was back in 2006. It's the Latina Community Foundation. And what they've done that I think is really genius, and I really have been spending more time trying to figure out how to deploy it across other areas that I'm focused on, is they created a giving circle program. So folks in their community could actually come together and figure out where funds went, where they were going to invest. And that just really, again, broadens the whole community element. And what I love about it is that they had 3 tenets of this program. They said, like, it's familia. So, you're coming together with like-minded people. It has to be impactful, that you're doing something that's going to cause change. And it has to be democratic, that you're making decisions together. So don't lose this thought, and let's move on to the next one. The next one is pull, not push. And I can't tell you how many sessions that I've been in, and I'm sure that you're the same way, Zoom events that people are really just pushing information at you. They could be canned presentations. It could be, it doesn't matter, but there's no way like, so I'm here and like, what are you saying to me? But I might have something to say, or I might be part of a community that has something to say. And this is where you need to kind of start thinking about, how do you engage audiences that just more than showing up for a Zoom event? I have 2 great examples. One is, and both of these are new, the Lego Idea Conference, which took place the first part of March. They were one of 2 events that we spoke to the organizers and the folks behind delivering the event. And the Lego Idea Conference, it took place in Denmark. It's a big deal. They had 5 days. They pretty much figured out their keynotes and general sessions. They broadcast those. But their breakout rooms, and there was really something about creativity and people coming together that they were missing. So what they did, and they felt that it was actually kind of liberating to, even though they had spent like 8 months planning for this, they had less than 8 days to figure out what are we going to do. So they created a 24-hour coffee shop, and when breakouts were going on, so people could pop in and meet other people and just check in, especially because they had a global audience. They created a challenge that by using hashtags, it was a Rube Goldberg machine challenge, that they could get the community to actually share what they were doing, where they didn't have to be that involved, but the community could check in and see what was going on. And more importantly, after the event, they created something called the playline.net, which is an online source for educators and creators to get together weekly. And it still continues to this day. They started with 2 half-hour sessions a day, 5 days a week. It's now 1 half-hour session. But they have educators, creators from around the world that check in for a half an hour. And the first 2 minutes or so, they do a breathing exercise. They share what's going on, and they close it with a breathing exercise. So that's a great example of how, again, you're starting to be part of the community and you're pulling the community in. The second example is the Open Hardware Summit. And their 10th anniversary event took place this year. It was going to take place, it was Friday the 13th, and it was going to take place in New York at the New York NYU Law Building. And they figured out at the end that they needed a place for their community to come together. So they spun up a Discord server. And on this server, and I'll talk about that in kind of the next area as well, they were actually able to give their community members a place to go and communicate with each other while the keynote was going on and being broadcast through YouTube. So not only did people have a chance to talk about, what was happening on stage, they also had the speakers come and jump into those sessions after they were off stage. So even the experience was better than what would happen in a live event, because there's a good chance that most speakers, keynoters, good luck, you probably don't even see them. But now the community was actually having a chance to interact with a keynoter at levels that had never happened before. And in some cases, they found that the people that were in the audience actually had more knowledge than the keynoter or the session speaker. And so that became a win-win. So think about pull, not push. And the next slide, let's see if we're doing on time here, this is one I really want to reinforce, because think about how much time we spend finding venues. And we do that we've done that for physical events, but we don't spend a whole lot of time to figure out what type of venue or where we want our community to gather on online events. We spend more time figuring out what platform are we going to use, et cetera, et cetera. But again, think about your community and think about your tribe. They need to come together. And one of the key things here is that, like, Reddit is a good example. I don't know how many of you know Reddit, but Reddit is really
Did we lose Sherry?
We did.
Uh-oh.
So she'll be back on in just a moment. I think what
I'm back on.
Oh, there she is. Okay, great.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know what happened there. Anyway, Reddit is the front page of the internet. It's a gathering of communities, and it's kind of an interesting idea because it's where you go to find things. Freeman has an event they're working on tomorrow called Funimation.com. It's a Sony event that's a virtual anime conference. It is the first platform that I've seen that's built in an area for community, and you can actually go into Discord right from that event. So you can you'll have chat, you'll have Q&A, which just happens during that session, but you'll also have a chance to be 24/7 with your people, and that lives outside of the event when it's over. And Discord, and it doesn't matter, Discord is something that the gaming community created for a place for them to be home and to talk. And an interesting trivia piece about the gaming community is that 75% of the time they spend talking about gaming, and 25% of the time they game. So this is a place that really, it was set up for them to game, to talk, and to belong. And it really has become home. And so whatever you can do to provide that, and very few people are doing it, I have to say. It's one of these things like, wow, step back and figure that out, because that's a key component and element. And the next slide is talking a little bit about, I'm involved in a project called Live Labs. I'm a founding member along with Itamar Kabovi, Charles Adler, who are design council members at Freeman that Bruce brought in. And we're really out there kind of building our own tribe now, and we're talking to innovators and event folks that are dealing with all of these circumstances that we're faced with today. And I'd love to chat with any of you. In the next slide has my email address, but really, all of this is we're working together to figure out what the new reality is. And what's really clear is events are going to come back, hands down. There are things that you can't achieve online that you can achieve, especially around community, with events. But there are new skills and new trends that we're going to be learning, and those are going to stay with us. And now's the time to actually get engaged and kind of build that rhythm and that balance that is so important in building tribes. And hoping that I can join you in some of your conversations, and hope that this was helpful. But I'm definitely available to chat with any of you. And I feel just strongly that there are major opportunities right now, and now's the time to grab them and start working on them. So thank you.